Looks like we're back again for another season discussion of Smallville, everyone. It's a great time to be talking about the show, as if it wasn't big enough. The fandom completely surged back when Tom Welling and Erica Durance appeared on Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was great, by the way. Even though we didn't get to see Tom in the suit, it was a really heartwarming follow-up to those two characters, but enough about that, I'm getting off track. Today I want to be discussing Smallville Season 4. So, once again, let's just see where our characters are at. This season takes place 3 months after the finale of Season 3. Clark went to fulfill his destiny at the end of the last season, and in this one, he returns back to Earth with no previous memory of Clark Kent, and he claims to be the one and only Kal-El. He's hell-bent on trying to find this Kryptonian stone that Lex Luthor had, and, well, the whole memory loss Kal-El thing, that doesn't really last too long. Long story short, Clark's mission this season is to find all 3 of these Kryptonian stones, or relics if you will, try to figure out what he wants to do as far as college goes, or anything after high school for that matter, and juggle all that with the jealousy of seeing Lana with someone else. Speaking of Lana, let's talk about her and what she's been up to. Well, not much. She's exactly where we left her off at the end of Season 3. She was heading to Paris. This season, she's in Paris. And she has a new boyfriend, actually, by the name of Jason Teague. Eventually, Lana returns to Smallville. Jason follows, but Lana brings back something more than a new boyfriend. She's embodied with the spirit of a witch named Isabel Thoreau. Oh, and Jason gets a job as a coach at Smallville High. This should be interesting. Lex, he's on a mission to find the stones. Yep, the same ones Clark's looking for too. Clark and Lex's friendship has been strained, and that's no different in this season. Lex's dad, Lionel, is in prison just like at the end of Season 3, but I mean, he can't really stay in there for long, can he? And once Lionel's released, guess what? He's another person who's going to be looking for these stones too. And finally, after multiple teases, in episode 1 of this season, in comes Lois Lane. She's on a mission to figure out what happened to her cousin Chloe at the end of Season 3. That's right, if you remember, Chloe walked into that house and boom, the whole thing exploded. Like, is she dead? Well, that gets resolved rather quick. Lois has a pretty rocky start in this season. She's in the first few episodes, then she leaves, then she comes back. She's more or less a recurring character. She's not in the opening credits or anything like that. Last but not least, Chloe. Like I said, her death and the way they did it in this show, it got debunked really quick, and I wish they would have stretched it out for a few more episodes to build up some more anticipation, but I get it. They need to have that face screen time. In this season, her arc isn't that interesting. I mean, some little interesting things happen 2/3 of the way through the season, but we'll talk about that later. So, why don't we dive into everything noteworthy about Season 4? And let's just start it off with Pete Ross. So, I know Sam Jones III left last season. I think he went off to film some Disney movie or something like that. I thought maybe he could have bigger plans. And I get it. You're in high school and you don't want to be living in Clark's shadow anymore. You don't want to deal with any of the repercussions that happens because of what he does. But Pete is not mentioned once. Clark doesn't talk about Pete with Chloe or Lana or any of his other friends. There's no phone calls. There's no letters in the mail. Like the letters or like the phone calls I can get, but like you're not even gonna tell your mom like, Mom, I miss Pete, or like talk to Chloe or Lana and be like, hey guys, remember when we did this with Pete? Like, no mention of him whatsoever. So what's next? Lois and Clark. We start to see subtle hints in this season at a possible future relationship between these two characters. I mean, obviously, it's bound to happen if anyone's read the comics or seen previous TV shows or movies. Clark's trying to play it off by being cool and saying, like, the thought of being with Lois is gross, she's bossy, she's mean, and she's everything he doesn't look for in a woman. I thought it was funny that there's a scene where Clark goes to save Lois, but of course, Kryptonite's involved, so Lois actually saves Clark. The tables have turned. There's even a funny scene where Lois dunks Clark in the dunk tank, and she goes to mess up his hair, and Clark's like smiling at her and stuff like that, and Chloe notices them looking at each other, and she's like her facial expression just drops, and she's like, oh no, what's going on here? Like, nothing obviously too romantic happens between them this season, just subtle little hints. Not to mention, we get to see an early spark inside Lois Lane to follow a story. when she was trying to investigate what happened to her cousin Chloe, she went right to the source. She didn't care. She went right to Lionel Luthor while he was in prison. She's a firecracker for sure, and we get to see her kicking some serious ass this season. I guess that's thanks to her dad being an army general. This is the first season where we see more famous comic book characters being thrown into the mix. As I mentioned earlier, we have General Sam Lane, Lois's dad, and we also have Lucy Lane, who's introduced, Lois's sister. Mr. Mxyzptlk, like, I always forget how to pronounce it. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce it, because I think that's how they said it on Supergirl when he was in there. But he goes by the name of Mikhail in this season. It's a type of version of the character, not completely comic book accurate, but I mean, it's before Clark was Superman, so I guess he got some wiggle room. And this is the big one, Bart Allen. That's right, the Flash appears in Smallville Season 4. Well, Impulse, but we'll talk about that in future seasons. The episode with him in it is a treat for sure. I'd love to see his version of Flash, aka Impulse, team up with Grant Gustin maybe in one of the crossovers. Speaking of that, we have a scene where Clark's going through Bart Allen's IDs. One of the IDs says Barry Allen, Wally West, Jay Garrick. Of course, all references to other Flashes we know and love from the comics and TV shows. Let's have a more in-depth discussion about what Clark's doing this season. So, we get introduced to Black Kryptonite in this season. Martha Kent had to use this to basically separate the Jor-El manipulated Kal-El from her son Clark, which in a nutshell is what Black Kryptonite does. It separates the beast from the man, so to speak, which is really cool because we got introduced to Red Kryptonite before, of course the original Green Kryptonite, we have Black Kryptonite now, and what I'm guessing is what happened to Clark in Crisis on Infinite Earths is maybe they used Gold Kryptonite. I know it has power to take Superman's powers away completely, so maybe that's how he did it. Clark's hell-bent on playing football this season, and of course his dad does not want him doing it all. Even though he's seen him do it in previous seasons, he still doesn't approve. His dad thinks that at some point Clark will just lose control of his abilities while he's playing football, or try to do way better than the other players, which is understandable. So what happens is, Clark loses control. He accidentally hurts someone really bad. But, of course, being the great football player he is, Clark ends up getting a full ride to Metropolis University, but gives it up. He is really hesitant, but he tries to make amends with Lex, and like I said, that's just a whole strained friendship this season. Clark and Lionel Luthor switch bodies for an episode this season, and it's weird because when Lionel's inside Clark's body, he almost kisses Chloe. But he kisses Lana. What the hell? Don't get me wrong, dude is a straight up player, but Lionel Luthor is supposed to be what, like 40 or 50 or something like that? And he's over here in someone else's body kissing someone who I believe is 17. I mean, it's still early on in the season, so most of our characters are 17. I mean, would that make Lionel Luthor a pedophile? Or just not really, because he's also in the body of someone who's 17, Clark Kent? I have no idea. Before we get into more plot stuff, let's just lighten up the mood a little bit and talk about the odd, cringeworthy things that have happened this season. A few episodes in this season are really bad, like dumb bad. There's an episode called Spell where basically Lana touches this spell book. Lois, Lana, and Chloe are all possessed by witches. They dress up as goth chicks and come to seek revenge. It's just so out of place. Another episode, Sacred, has Lex Luthor and Jason Teague overseas in China looking for the stone, or relic if you will. Lana and Clark are soon to follow. Just everything about this episode felt off. Clark has to battle a witch who's possessing Lana. And during the fight, Lana's over here doing some ridiculous crouching tiger, hidden dragon shit. I mean, everything about this was just nonsense. From the cheesy powers to the dumb incantations, I don't know what it was and what the show's creator was obsessing over witches for. I mean, maybe it's because the show Charmed was out for a few years back in the day and it was doing good, but they definitely made a mistake, and it's one of the stupidest arcs in Smallville history. There's an episode called Spirit, and a girl wants to become prom queen, ends up dying, and then her spirit comes back to seek revenge. She starts possessing people, including Chloe and Clark, and what happens? We're left with one of the funniest things I've ever seen in Smallville. So in the meantime, Chloe was announced prom queen, but of course the girl possesses Clark. So Clark just bitch slaps the shit out of Chloe 20 feet across the room, and he's just like, crown's mine, bitch. I was dying, and I don't know about you guys, but maybe you can help me out on this. Like, I can understand like your sophomore dance or your junior high being in your own school auditorium or gym, but For the senior prom, shouldn't it be in a bigger place? Like for mine, we rented out some big place down the city. Other corny things, we get one of the villains in Smallville, a freak of the week, if you will. He has a metal morphing ability that's exactly the same as the T-1000 from Terminator. There's even a scene where he morphs his hand into a little bit of a blade, and it's like the exact shape and everything coming out. There's one little weird thing, kind of a minor thing I noticed this season. The episode I was watching took place in 2004, and Lois books a major consultation, surgery if you will, online. Like, I don't know about you guys, but like online doctor booking and surgery booking, even back then was like non-existent. For me at least, I didn't see that coming around to maybe like 2010 or 11. Another cool and funny thing is we get introduced to Krypto, the super dog, and Clark and the Kents eventually keep this dog as part of their family. Alright, back to some of the big plot stuff. So let's just talk about that Chloe stuff I was mentioning earlier. Well, her mom's in a mental institution. And also, we find out with the help of a recurring character, Alicia, the teleporting girl from back in season 3, Chloe finds out that Clark has powers. My God, finally. Now, oddly enough, Chloe doesn't tell Clark she knows the whole season. She drops like subtle hints here and there, but Clark's just like, yeah, like he just plays it off like it's nothing. Another thing is Clark has amnesia for a little bit, so he forgets he has powers, so he wakes up, he's like, oh my God, what the hell is this? So Chloe actually helps him hone those powers. Like I said, she has a little bit of importance this season. Oh, and when Clark has amnesia, Lex, of course, tries to grab information from Clark he didn't previously know. Which just goes to show, Lex Luthor always stays scheming. Towards the middle to end of the season, Jason Teague isn't really in the show as much, for obvious reasons. Well, he went on to bigger and better things. The whole subplot of Lex Luthor hiring Jason Teague to go against his mom, I don't even want to get into that. Anything dealing with the witches is just a cringeworthy mess. So before I wrap up this season with my final thoughts, let's talk about some cameos. Even though he's credited in the show's opening this season, Jensen Ackles plays Lana's love interest this season, and of course, the Smallville High football coach. It's really funny because at times you can see him channeling his inner Dean Winchester at an early age. Margot Kidder guest stars as Bridget Crosby. Superman fans, of course, will recognize her as the original girl who played Lois Lane in the Richard Donner Superman film. Kobe Smulders from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and How I Met Your Mother. She just basically plays an angry chick that Lex Luthor got with. Kyle Gallner from The Haunting in Connecticut and the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot guest stars as Bart Allen. Eric Johnson reprises his role of Whitney for an episode. Final Destination 2 actress Sarah Carter is back in this season as Alicia, until she's discovered dead in a hangman's noose just dangling from the rafters. Talk about morbid. There's a few other guest stars here and there, but let's get back on track and wrap this up. So in the final episodes of this season, we're introduced to a character by the name of Evan, and he has a rapid aging disorder. But while he's a little baby, Clark and Lana are taking care of him, and it just really gets a warm feeling to see Clark Kent being an early father figure. Oh, and in the final episode, a second meteor shower happens. That's right, a second meteor shower in Smallville. So before all that happens, we have graduation at Smallville High. All the kids are still figuring out what they want to do. The spirit of Isabel Thoreau leaves Lana's body. Jason Teague goes looking for Clark Kent because he's looking for the stones now too. But once he confronts Martha and Jonathan Kent, a meteor crashes into the house with Jonathan, Martha, and him inside, so who knows what happened there. Lana's trying to flee Smallville in a helicopter, which eventually gets hit by a meteor. She's weak, she's crawling out of the helicopter, and it's revealed that there's a huge black spaceship right in front of her. Who or what could be inside? I guess we'll find out next season. Lex forces Chloe to lead him to Clark to see what he's doing with the stones all the way down in those caves. But they're too late. Clark grabs the crystal and he's instantly transported to the Arctic. You know what that means, right? Fortress of Solitude in Season 5. Let's go. Guys, in the end, out of Seasons 1 through 4, I would say Season 4 is the weakest in my opinion. It's still not bad in the slightest bit, but I mean, if you would have taken out all the witch stuff, I'm sure you could have found a plot arc for Lana, and it would have been a near perfect season. Luckily, there's enough stuff going on with Clark and Lois and the rest of the gang to kind of salvage this season for me. The end of the season left on a huge cliffhanger, and regardless of its cringeworthy moments, Smallville Season 4 still gets a 7.5 out of 10.